Excellennial here with another story-based Excel tutorial, and today I'm going to tell you about Meredith, the event planner. Meredith organizes events and uses Excel to keep track of her vendors, locations, and customers. She needs to find a way to make this list more organized. This is a large list, and she gets overwhelmed by the clutter of her spreadsheet. So I'm going to give you some tips on how to organize spreadsheets and see if we can help Meredith along the way. Now, as you can see, this is a pretty overwhelming spreadsheet. Not much of this is actually legible, and the header is not even clear what the columns are. So I'm going to start with tip number 1, wrap text. This is one of the easiest ways to get your spreadsheet to be much more organized and compress the rows when they're expanded to fit all of the data that's inside of them. It can be found on your Home tab right about in the center, right here, just above Merge and Center. And one thing you're going to have to be sure to do is to actually select all of the active cells. Let's see, N2, I'll select that area. If I only have one cell selected, you can see it changes the format of the text, but it doesn't really do anything for the whole spreadsheet. So we're going to select the area right in the corner next to column A and row 1. And that'll select all of the data that we have on this spreadsheet. And now when we select wrap text, it cleans this up a whole lot. The next thing we're going to do is resize the rows. We'll go ahead and reselect all of the cells by selecting the little corner area right next to A and 1. And when we put our mouse between any of these rows, let's go with between 2 and 3, we'll get a little icon pop up that shows 2 arrows pointing the opposite directions. For the rows, the arrows are pointing up and down, and for the columns, they actually point left and right. So for the rows, what we can do, let's say Meredith wants a little bit more space between these rows. We can actually click and drag, and then it will expand all of the rows. We don't want them that far apart. So let's double click and reset it, and then just a tad bit more. The other thing that we can do is make these rows expand individually. So if we don't have everything selected, we can still do that same thing, but just on one row. We'll double click if we want it to go back. And there you go. So now this is a little bit more organized in the way that Meredith wants, but we still can see that a lot of this information is overlapping between the columns. To fix that, what we're going to do is resize the columns, just like we just resized the rows. As I said before, once you have that little icon come up with the opposite pointing arrows, you can actually click and drag individual rows or columns, in this case columns. But to save time and also to just make it look more clean, we'll select all of the cells and then double click between column A and B. And now everything is automatically sized according to the data that is inside each of these cells. Now we can see all of the data that we have in here, and this is way better than it was before. The one thing that I think we can do to make this even better for Meredith is to actually create one individual tab per type. So she had 3 types in here, which was customer, vendor, and location/venue. So let's make one tab for each of those. Now that we have a tab for each of these items, I'm going to copy the first row, because that's the header row, and paste that into each of these tabs. I'm going to make sure that this column is sorted A to Z now. I don't want to be copying some customer items and then have a vendor pop up in there. I only want to be copying customer items to the customer tab. So that's going to be under data. I'll select cell A1 and press A to Z. And then that's going to have this entire column sorted A to Z, or Z to A if we want to do vendor first. I think it's best to copy the data from the bottom so we can use the Control-Shift-Scroll option. So we'll start way down here with customer, and we know that we're going to take all of these rows because everything from here on down is a customer row. So on my keyboard, I'm going to press Shift-Command on Mac, or for Windows, it's Shift-Control, and then press the down button. That's going to take us to the very bottom of this entire spreadsheet, and now I can cut the data here so it removes it completely from the original spreadsheet. I'll go to the Customer tab, and then in cell A2, right-click, and paste. Now we have the same problem that we had before where some of our columns are overlapping. So again, I'll select all and then double-click on one of our columns and resize everything accordingly. And I'll do the same thing now with the vendor tab and the location venue tab. Find the top of the location venue list, Control Shift down. And I didn't select the row this time, so I'm also going to have to press over until I get all of the data here. So either select the entire row or select the one cell, just make sure that everything is highlighted accordingly. And then right-click, cut, location venue, A2, right-click, paste. Again, not everything is sized correctly, so we'll fix that quick. And now all we have left is vendor. So really, we have two options. We can copy this all over to the vendor tab, or we can just delete the vendor tab and then rename this one. So all of a sudden, this is way more organized and Meredith is way better off. She can easily read all of the data that she has now, and she even has it organized by tabs, so she knows exactly where to go to if she just needs to look for a vendor in a certain area code, and everything's much more tidy now. After going through a couple of these organizational tips, Meredith is very happy with what her spreadsheet looks like now. She's going to save way more time instead of filtering through all the things that she is trying to find by just going to the one tab and being able to see an easy overview of every vendor, every customer, and so on. It'll be much easier to review all her data, and she's pretty happy. Let me know if you have any questions, and until next time, have fun excelling.